Learning to do things Yah's way means we have to stop doing things at times our way. Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 2, the Torah portion, Bahar, on the Mount. We're continuing now in the book of Leviticus, or V'ikra, chapter 25, and let's begin with verse number 2. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall observe a Shabbat to Yahweh. 6 years you sow your field, and 6 years you prune your vineyard, and you gather its fruit. But in the 7th year the land is to have a Shabbat of rest, a Shabbat to Yahweh. Do not sow your field, and do not prune your vineyard. Do not reap what grows of its own in your harvest, and do not gather the grapes of your unpruned vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Shabbat of the land shall be to you for food, for you and your servant, and for your female servant, and your hired servant, and for the servant who sojourns with you, and for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, and all of its crops are for food. And so we find instructions concerning what is called the Shemitah cycle. It is well reported from many locations that this year is a Shemitah cycle. I've worked my garden box outside that I have and had fully intended on putting out some various plants. Went to buy the plants. I tried growing from seed and it really didn't work well. That was my fault. And got checked. Son, are you going to trust me in this or not? And I'm thinking, Father, there's shortages. You're hearing about the fertilizer shortages. You're hearing about the food shortages. Food production is down. We're going to need some help this year. So if I can grow a few things, and of course I went into my arguments, my reasonings, my debate with him. Yah won out in the end. Now, if you're planting this year, do not receive any criticism from me. That's between you and Yah. And it's debatable as to what year that we're in. Many say that we are in Shemitah year. There are a few that say, maybe it's not this year, but a different year. Again, we're not here to throw stones. So if you're planting or have planted, be blessed and favored in that. I'm choosing not to this year, and I'm still scratching my head over this one. But here's the thought and the principle. This group of people in the wilderness, at the time that this is being said to them, are still at Mount Sinai. They are still in a whirlwind of worldview and perspective renewal. Their whole world, their identity, their culture, their expected future, everything has been radically, incredibly changed. They went down as a family under the leadership of Yaakov, going back to see Joseph. Came into Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and it's, Joseph said, the famine is among us for another 5 years. Stay here, I'll take care of you. They survived the famine. You would have thought, okay, the famine's over and food's growing again. Let's go back home. They didn't go back home. They had become so settled that they stayed. Now, was this the original intent of Yah? Ultimately, yes. He allowed this settling of the family in order to serve a longer-term purpose. That is, that Israel would get a bellyful, that they would get a refined process of exile, that they would go through a furnace of affliction, and that they would cry out for the deliverer that was promised all the way back in Bereshit, of Genesis 3:15. And a prototype of that deliverer was sent to them in the person of Moshe. Now, They needed to see that Yah would work for them. They needed to see the entire process that we've already studied in the previous book of Exodus or Shemot, and get to this process of living and dwelling in the wilderness, where they are now being transformed from a people of a slave mindset, a mindset that says, well, what I get is what I deserve. A mindset that says someone else always has authority over me. A mindset that says you can't expect too much out of life. And Yah is saying to them, when you come into my land, this land that I'm giving you, hark, pay attention, I just gave you a clue. I'm telling you, you are going into the land. Now, this generation is going to fail to do so, but their upcoming generation is going to succeed in that. When you come into the land, he's going to tell them, you're going to see crops in the fields and homes that are already built and vineyards that are ready to reap. You don't have to plant for the first year. The land is going to have a Shabbat. It's going to rest. Work it for 6 years. Enjoy the increase. And we'll talk more about that in a few, probably tomorrow. Enjoy the increase of the land, the bounty of the land. But in the 7th year, be mindful that it's my year of rest. Rest with me. Now, recently I was in the state of California in the Fresno area, where there is an overabundance of agricultural industry. Indeed, it's a leading, if not the leading, agricultural center in the earth. It is an amazing place, and food of all kinds and types, it's growing everywhere. I stood in a field of what was called Shemitah wheat. This is wheat that was not planted, but it grew up on its own from kernels and grains that fell last year. And I'm telling you that the field was full, completely full. And I was amazed at the crop that just grew up. They are going to pick that grain, harvest that grain. They're going to take it. They're going to give it to the poor. They're going to do some things with it. They're going to let it just rot in the field. But I'm telling you that Yah knows how to bring food out of the ground when we trust him. But here's the principle. Our inclination, our rationale and rational thinking would say, well, if you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't plant, you don't grow. If you don't do A, you can't get B. And Yah is saying to us, at times, you need to learn to trust me. You need to give the land its rest. You need to understand that Shabbat is Shabbat. You work your 6 days, you work your 6 years, you work your 49 years. You have these days where it's principled. You work, you labor, you rest. If you get into my cycle, my focus and time cycle of things, you will find increase, favor, and blessing, and I will take care of you. So it's the question of, do we trust him or not? Do we believe him at his word or not? Can Yah sustain a people when they walk according to his word? And I know, I don't just believe, I know the answer is yes. The world around us is not going to understand. Friends, neighbors, family are going to scratch their head. Let them scratch. They'll be fine. And so will you. When those situations arise and you go to him in prayer and he says, this is what I want you to do, and you think, it doesn't make any sense to me, trust him. If you know his voice, if you are staying in his word's abiding in you, his spirit's applying that word to your heart and your life, you're walking it out, you're seeking to be obedient. When God gives you a command and you scratch your head and you say, I don't see how this is going to function well, trust him. He is indeed trustworthy. We'll talk more about Shemitah tomorrow. Until then, shalom.